Okay.
Welcome everyone to the April 16th Planning Board meeting. Today on the agenda,
There she
we
is.
are going to review minutes from April 2nd. We have a special permit to consider for 104 Interlaken Road from Jacob and Katie Silverman. And finally, we have a presentation from the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. So I'm going to start with the public hearing. I think we're all familiar with the drill, but the following procedures will be followed. Testimony will be limited to the issues directly related to the subject matter. Only one person will be permitted to speak at a time. All discussion will go through the chair and in voices that are clearly audible to all meeting attendees. Civility is encouraged. Arguments between parties will not be permitted. So with that, I think Shannon is here Shannon Boomsna from White Engineering, and she will tell us a story about what is being proposed for 104 Interlaken Road.
Okay, so good evening. Last year, the board issued a special permit for work in the Lake and Pond Overlay District at this property. We have an existing house on the west side of Stockbridge Bowl. Our proposal at that time was to build an addition on the north side, a new garage, and an outdoor kitchen and patio on the south side. The owners have determined that they would like a screen porch in the area where that outdoor kitchen was going to be and the patio, and then another patio off of that. So this is in the Lake and Pond Overlay District. Those of us who did a site visit saw that the outdoor kitchen structure was built. So that is going to come down. The screen porch is going to be built with possibly, we saw that was on piers. It was proposed to be on a frost wall. So I'm going to say that'll be put on a frost wall within the screen porch. And then the rest of the screen porch will be on helical piers and then a patio off of that stone set in sand. It'll be no closer to the lake than the existing covered patios attached to the existing house. A little bit closer than what we had approved, but not dramatically increasing the footprint of the house. And we are going to do a deed restriction stating that the screen porch can not be enclosed as year-round living area.
Okay.
If you recall, at the approval, we agreed to revegetation of the Lake and Pond Overlay District, lawn areas to become native vegetation. And that still remains.
Good. So I understand from David that the work that's been done with regard to the vegetation is definite improvement over what was there. That's great. I think there's some sense that we could, going forward, David has reviewed it and he's fine with the numbers and everything. But I think that in terms of what you provide to the board for special permits, I think you did it for 82 Interlaken Road. If we could get a little bit more data showing the delta between what was originally proposed and then what is currently proposed, because this is a change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that, David, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well,
Yeah, sure. And I don't think it's critical for this one because this one was pretty straightforward. This is a very small incremental change based on what was proposed last year with the new garage and the other items. And the planting, especially along the Stockbridge Bowl shoreline, is going to be a huge improvement for this property as well as the invasive species removal. So this is a good project. But Shannon, if you guys, for future applications, to make it easier for the board and for me or someone like me reviewing these things, if you could put in like an itemized disturbance tabulations matrix or table on your site plan, similar to what you did for 82 Interlaken, that shows, okay, this is existing, structure by structure. This is the existing square footage, and this is what's proposed with the new stuff. It just makes it easier to check the numbers. Otherwise, when you guys say, say for this one, 10.1% of the LPOD will now be occupied with structures or features, as opposed to the slightly smaller number before. It's difficult for us to QA those numbers without seeing an itemized tabulation of it. So it just, it's supporting the work you guys do. I mean, I think the numbers for this one make sense, but if you could make it easier on us, that will make it easier on your clients too.
Sure. Can actually tell you the roof area on the outdoor kitchen was 54 square feet. The new screen porch is 290.9 square feet. The patio was 175 square feet and the new patio is 350.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Nope.
Did we review this at the Historic Preservation Commission?
No.
Okay, I'm confusing it with a different address. Okay, thank you.
There is no demolition to the existing house.
Great,
It's all interior work and additions.
Okay. Anyone else on the board? Okay. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor? If you could please identify yourself with your name and address for the record. No? Anybody who wishes to speak in opposition? No? Okay, so we can now, I think, close the evidentiary portion of the hearing. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Oh,
We have to do the roll call.
Oh, yeah.
Carl?
Aye.
Aye, Kate?
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Wayne.
Okay, so it sounds like you would be fine with a condition that the porch will not be enclosed? Okay, so I would move that we have a condition that the proposed porch, screen porch, will not be enclosed. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Oh,
Carl?
Carl.
Aye, Kate?
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Wayne.
Okay, with that, I think we're on our way to granting this additional special permit. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second. You got it.
All in favor?
Aye, Carl.
Aye, Kate?
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, we forgot to do the minutes, so has everyone had a chance to take a look at those?
Motion to approve.
Second, all in
I'll
favor?
second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, Carl?
Carl, yes.
Aye, Kate?
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Wayne.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, everyone. Next up, we have the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. And by way of introduction, I'm just going to give a little bit of a description of the committee. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund was created in July of 2022, acting by and through its Board of Selectmen in accordance with the vote of the June 12, 2021 annual town meeting and pursuant to the provisions of MGL Chapter 44, Section 55C. The purpose of the trust shall be to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in the town of Stockbridge for the benefit of low and moderate income households and for the funding of community housing as defined in and in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44B of the Massachusetts General Laws. In furtherance of this purpose, the trust shall be authorized to acquire by gift, purchase, or otherwise real estate and personal property, both tangible and intangible, of every sort and description, use such property, both real and personal, in such manner as the Board of Trustees shall deem most appropriate to carry out such purpose consistent with the policies adopted from time to time by the Board of Selectmen regarding affordable housing and this declaration of trust. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jan Ackerman, who is the vice chair of the committee, and she is going to do a brief 10-minute presentation on what they have been working on. And thank you very much for your work, by the way. They have a draft housing production plan, which is dated February 2024. And for any viewers, you can find this available to download and review on the town website. So it's all yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, see if I can share my screen. Is it best with you over here?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry.
Be 1 second, second, find it. Yeah.
There you are.
Okay, if I can share my screen. No. My apologies. Do, um,
Do you see the screen with how to use it on the browser?
no,
Nichols here.
yes. Share.
I don't know. Just got it. Do you see it?
No.
Mhm.
This is what this is. This is.
Yeah, this is what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read it all. I just got it before.
What's this? No. 'Cause I didn't see any.
Okay, okay, this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good questions.
Yes.
Later. It was a good thought.
It was a good thought. I said that, that's not what keep everybody out there.
All right.
You just haven't given yourself permission.
I haven't given myself. Well, there you go. Sorry for the delay.
What's your, wasn't the password?
So I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes to go over a summary of the housing production plan that the Affordable Housing Trust has been working on for quite some time now. And as part of that, I'll let you know the process we've gone through. We have, can everyone read that? Yes?
Yes.
So we have, the purpose of all of this was to understand the local information about housing in Stockbridge and to identify what the needs are and some of the priorities in town for housing. And then to identify some strategies and address those needs and priorities. And then lastly, to create a 5-year plan for housing. And that plan is not a specific plan in terms of projects, individual projects and so on. It's really an aspirational plan of looking at what we might like to add in terms of capital A affordable housing in town. And as part of that process, we went through having a community housing workshop back in July, where we had fairly good attendance throughout the town. And we've incorporated a number of the comments and suggestions from that housing workshop into the development of this plan. We also had a community housing survey, which we did over the summer. And we had, I think, 75 responses to that, so a good number of responses. And all of those prioritized what were the highest priority things that were identified by the community that responded to the survey. We've taken that into account, and also the things that they suggested we not pursue. So we've tried to take that into account in putting together this housing production plan. We've had monthly affordable housing trust meetings, some of which had discussions about components of this housing production plan. And then on the 28th of March, we had a community forum, and some people in the room were in that forum. And that was really to present this housing production plan to the community and get feedback from the community in terms of that. And then the next steps going forward are really to present it to you, planning board, have a discussion, try to answer your questions and get feedback from you about what your sense is of this housing production plan. And then hopefully on Thursday this week, we also plan to go to the select board, present it to the select board, and then ask for their suggestions and whatever. We'll then try to incorporate all of those components into a revised production plan, which we would then come back to the planning board and ask you to approve, and go to the select board and ask the select board to approve it. And following that, it would be presented to the state for approval by the state. So just a very quick summary about the housing conditions. I'm sure if you read through the housing production plan, you probably saw most of these, but I wanted to highlight a couple. We have about 1,650 homes, 80% of which were built before 1980. A large portion, I want to say 40% or more, were built before World War II. So it's an aging housing inventory, if you will. We have about 811 full-time resident homes. So roughly half of the homes are for full-time residents. And we have exceeded, as you probably know, state affordability requirement, because we're at 10.47. The three areas, as you well know, are Eaton Court, Pine Woods, and Riverbrook. They qualify as the So very quickly, the key trends that we're seeing is resident population has declined, I think almost like 10% over the last decade, and about 20% over the past 20 years. There are fewer residents aged 30 to 50. The population has declined. The population has aged significantly. So the median age in 2010, just 14 years ago, was 41. It's now 60 is the median age. And the decrease in the median household income has also been significant. So 10 years ago, that figure was closer to 57,000. It's now 46.5, the median household income. There have been increases in poverty in the population, and about 21% of the residents have claimed a disability. So at the same time, we're seeing very slow housing growth, only 40 units in recent times, a very low vacancy rate, which also indicates that there's a very tight housing market. And housing costs are no longer affordable for many people in town and in the neighborhood. So we have high cost burdens as well. So 1 in 3 households spend more than 30% of their income, and 1 in 8 more than 50%. So we have identified the priority housing needs as the need for both rental and homeownership units, the need for resources to improve the housing stock. And this is because we got quite a bit of feedback that some residents were not really able to do some of the renovations, including energy efficiency renovations and so on, to their homes because they didn't have the funding to do that. And so one of the things that we might look at is what are their state or federal programs that would provide funding either on grant or loan basis to enable those renovations to take place. And also greater need for handicapped access. The housing production goals that we've identified for the next 5 years are to target about 0.5% of the year-round housing units. And this is a requirement of the state if you're going to do a housing production plan. For Stockbridge, that works out to be about 5 units per year, or in aggregate over the 5 years, 25 units of what we would call capital A affordable housing. And that definition is that they are affordable to someone who is at about the 80th percentile of the area median income. The area median income for a family of 2 is about $65,000 right now. Keep in mind that that's the area median income, whereas Stockbridge's median income for residents is about $46,000. So we also, if I can move on here. We've identified some housing strategies that would enable us to accomplish those objectives. One would be to building capacity. So we have, as I mentioned, conducted ongoing kind of community outreach and education. We would anticipate continuing to do that. So we continue to get feedback from the community consistently throughout this process about the housing plans that might be coming forward. We'd like to capitalize the Affordable Housing Trust Fund further beyond what it has right now to enable us to do some of the projects that would indicate, that would allow those units to be built, and to secure financial resources for affordable housing in general. So there are some zoning strategies. I think it's fair to say we're not envisioning that there would be any major zoning changes or be requesting major zoning changes. We are suggesting that we adopt zoning for ADUs. As we all know, the state is developing their own plans for ADUs. And we'll probably have something coming forward within the next 6 months to a year. And the town of Stockbridge would have some ability to put restrictions on that or to modify. One of the things that was a big discussion in the community forum the other day was a week or two ago was about ADUs and about the concern of not having a lot of short-term rentals. So people would build ADUs and then have short-term rentals. And so, but a lot of the ADUs that other towns have done, and presumably the state would go along with this, really don't, they require either a longer term lease. So whether it's 6 months or a year lease, so they cannot really do short-term rentals because that would not really accomplish what the objective would be of trying to provide more housing for at an affordable level. Other than the ADU zoning, we're thinking about very modest opportunities that might come up in terms of a wider range of, that would provide a wider range of housing options in certain areas. And for this, I would say there isn't any specific plan, but one of the things that came back from the workshop we had last year was a desire to have a little more housing, not in downtown, but close to downtown, that might be more of a kind of cluster nature. So, but there isn't any specific plan right now for that, but I'm just alerting you that that is something that may come up over this 5-year period that would involve the planning board. And there was also consistent, on the last one of these, to promote multifamily and two-family, to convert houses that exist right now, presumably in essentially the same structure, but convert them into two-family homes, which wouldn't really change the character of the neighborhood significantly, and would provide significant opportunities for additional housing. So that's really the summary of what I wanted to say about. There were one other things that we had in terms of the development and preservation strategies of how we would go about this. We'd want to partner with some developers on privately owned properties. We don't have any in mind at the moment. I'm sure you all know there is the Morris property that's been donated that we do not have at this point a clear reading of whether that's even buildable. So there's no concrete plan as part of this to be doing anything with the Morris property, but that is a potential possibility if it comes back that it is buildable and things might move forward on that front. And then we would also like to make suitable public property available for affordable housing. Not sure what that public property would be at this point, other than we know that the Stockbridge, did you want to say something?
We're talking about that, we included the dirt road that's unbuilt by Keaton Ford.
Yeah, and we know that Heaton Court Board has, the Stockbridge Housing Authority has been discussing whether to look at expansion of Heaton Court. That would be consistent with what we're talking about here, if they decide to do it. And then to also, as I mentioned before, to establish some housing preservation initiatives that would allow some of those renovations to take place. So that's basically the very brief summary of what the housing production plan is and where we go from here. So we'd like to respond to any questions you might have or comments, feedback you want to give to us.
So I'd like to start with the board. Thank you very much, Dan. And I'd like to start by giving the board a chance to ask questions. Does anybody have any questions? I know I do, so, but,
Why don't you go ahead and start?
okay. I had a feeling that was going to happen.
No, we cover a lot of ground.
Or not, take over here, Wayne.
What if you cover?
I'll defer to you happily. All right, so you've talked about demographics and so on. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more specifically about the actual need here in Stockbridge. So are you talking about employers here in town like Austin Riggs? Have you been in conversation with these folks or the Red Lion Inn? I'd love to know a little bit more about the specifics of the need.
We have not been, at least I haven't been in contact with employers. However, we do know that there are cases where they're having difficulty finding some employees who might live in town. And there have been discussions at length in terms of going together with other towns because of to provide fire and also EMT protections and so on. So I think there's probably more work to be done to look at the employer situation in town. However, there is, if you look at the houses that have sold recently in Stockbridge, the values are very high. I think it was 575,000 was the average or the median last year.
I think it's higher now.
It's higher now. And so and we see a big decline in the number of young people or young families in that age group from 30 to 50. So in terms of there being, a need for housing for that part of the population, I think there's pretty good evidence that there's a lack of availability.
So you just would prefer a different demographic here in town?
No, well, I think the demographic has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. So it wouldn't be doing anything other than maybe returning a little bit towards what has been Stockbridge for many, many, many years.
Okay, thank you. So the reason I asked about specific need was that, if you're thinking about someplace like the Red Lion Inn, I know they've come before the planning board before to talk about their housing needs. They do own a parcel right here in the center of town. That's about 2.7 acres, and that's in the business district. So it might be worth talking to them about that to see what, what might be done there. And then another question I have has to do with, you guys jump in anytime. Has to do with short-term rentals. Have you looked at the data? I know the town contracted with Granicus to gather data on the short-term rentals. Have you looked at that data yet?
I have not seen that data.
Okay.
Is it available that we could go over?
Yeah, I'll get you the preliminary numbers and that get you access into the reports.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do know that I did look at I think there were 130 some homes that were registered with the state. Homes in Stockbridge registered with the state to do short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And I know that, in one of our conversations, Jan, I had asked if you would, I'd recommended chatting with Jamie, and I have her permission to ask this question because she lived in Pine Woods for many years. Did you have a chance to talk to her to find out a little bit more about her experiences there?
I don't think I did.
Okay. Is Randy here? Yeah, you're here. I have a question for you, Randy.
Okay.
Can you come on up and introduce yourself, please?
I'd be happy to
Thank you.
stand by my good friend.
What would you like to know?
Well, I'm interested in the status of Elm Court. And I understand that you're good friends with Linda Law. So I know that they would be on, after the town approved the inclusionary housing bylaw last year, they would be on the hook for upwards of 2.6 million to contribute to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Do we have an update on what's happening with Elm Court currently? I know they came in last summer with a very good plan. And it was a plan that I was certainly welcome news to me, that I felt that abutters would be pleased with, and that would be very good for the town in terms of our tax base. So I'm wondering, but I haven't heard anything about what's going on there. So I'd be very interested to know if you have any information on what their plans are.
First of all, I am a good friend of Linda's.
Mhm.
However, I am not involved in any way in that project.
Okay,
I didn't attend for some reason in the Stockbridge approval of their permit, but I did attend the Lennox one. And she was very clear that they were moving forward with the plan to build the hotel and to build the spa. The plan that was approved before for the previous owner. Sorry.
That was the plan that was approved for Travasa.
Yes.
The
And
enormous,
I'm sorry, Carl.
the enormous addition.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So that's the plan that they have as approved. And it's approved by our town as well as Lennox. And it's my understanding that when she came back to you in the fall, that you also approved that she had begun under her permit and was diligently pursuing that plan.
okay, so she has abandoned then the plan that she brought before us informally last summer.
I can't speak since I didn't attend to that, and I'm not part of her company nor her
Okay.
plan.
All right.
I'm reporting this to the meeting that I attended in Lennox about what they approved, which I assume, I had to make a big assumption that they wouldn't have approved something that you didn't approve.
I'm not sure that we've seen this.
Well,
So
Carl,
we-
it was, so it was the original special permit that they were granted under, how many years ago, Michael, do you know?
By this.
I don't know the exact place, but then they did have an informal. They did have an informal discussion with the town, but that's it, informal.
Informal, right, but we don't know anything more about the status? Okay. All right, so that's that question. Any other questions?
What is our current status regarding accessory dwelling units? I feel like we have some kind of policy in the bylaws, but
We have some wording in the bylaw.
Yeah.
It certainly allows accessory dwelling units, but it limits them. So the whole idea was clearly to make it possible for someone to do an accessory bylaw, but it puts a cutoff date at 1990, which, of course, limits the number that are going to happen in town.
right.
So we last looked at, last year, Patrick brought two bylaws before the planning board. One was the inclusionary housing bylaw, which, required pay into the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. DeSisto figured out a go around, and Elm Court missed it. And then we had the ADU bylaw, which the planning board discussed and sent back to the select board for more work. So that was, I think there were some, I don't actually, do you guys remember? I think we weren't totally in agreement on some aspects of it.
Right,
Yep. So,
yeah.
so that's the stat, that's that.
And now we're waiting for the state.
And now we're waiting for the state,
Yeah.
right? And I assume that will come back to the planning board once we have more information from the state.
Because we wanted to wait to see what the state would
Right.
do before we
Right.
made our decisions or discussions. I have a question on, when you say capitalized fund, what does that number look like when you say capitalize this fund?
Well, I don't think there's a specific number that we have in mind. I think the idea would be to just identify some other resources that would allow us to have more funding in the trust. Because that would enable us to develop some of the affordable housing of 25 units.
Do you have an idea on those sources?
Well, one of them would be the one we were just talking about, if that comes about from Elm Court. Others might be state or federal programs that would be related. And could be part of the Justice Authority. So we have a fair amount of work to do to identify specifically what those would be and which ones it would make sense to go after. And probably it makes sense to do that when it's closer, when you have an actual project in mind rather than this idea going forward. Because that any proposal for state or federal funding will require a specific proposal, a project that you're talking about.
And I do go, I get kind of curious just to what Kate said about need and how that's established. Because as I read through, it seemed that the reasoning behind needing more units was that more folks in that category had moved into town over the last 10 years. And maybe I'm not reading this right, but you can correct me, but as I looked at it, it looked like because more people had come into town in that category, that was the reasoning behind needing more. And if I'm not mistaken, Pine Woods was built in that time. Is that correct?
Pine Woods was built about between 18 to 20 years ago. And it was initiated through the CPC and built by Construct. but I'm not quite sure that I understand.
Yeah.
There's nothing in our report that indicates that we've had an influx of anybody. In fact, we've had a loss of lower income and certainly the kind of middle class. I mean, we don't have a middle class anymore. I think we don't use that phrase very much anymore, but we use the term 30 to 50. Those are the childbearing family years. And that population has decreased dramatically in the last 10 years. And there are a lot of us who feel that if we're going to have a robust community, we need to have more than just retired people. And right now we have more than 50% of our community that's over 60. So
how would somebody be assisted specifically with the type of housing you're talking about? Is it somebody, do they have skin in the game per se? Are they going to be asked to participate, or does subsidized mean, what does that mean?
well, typically subsidized means with capital A that you have to do a rental program. I'm a real estate developer, and I think that if we're going to make a difference in our town, we need to build for sale housing. And we need to build affordable housing or houses that are affordable, not with capital A, but are available to that middle group of people, which means that we as a trust, if we're going to, and I'm hoping that our first project will be a for sale project, because that's the way to build community, to build families, and to build people, to build groups of people over here with young children. And we're missing a real important link in our community.
But you can't just, I mean, you can't just restrict the housing to families with young children, can you?
Well, we can try. If we do a program for sale, there's a lot more flexibility. The reason I feel that it's really important if we're going to change the availability of quote affordable, not necessarily capital A affordable, but affordable housing, so that people like our son and his wife, who have a 3-year-old, have been able to buy a house in Lenox, which is pretty exciting for us that they're close by. But they looked and looked and looked and looked and looked, and were very lucky, thanks to some help from a number of people, to find a house that they could afford, that of course they're having to do tremendous amount of work to, and et cetera. But there were very, very, very few houses in a sale price that they could afford.
But I think also, Wayne, to your question about, do they have any skin in the game? If it's a house ownership situation, they would have skin in the game, because they would have to have, there would be a down payment. There would be restrictions on how much growth in their equity value could be over the coming years.
And is that the
But-
difference in the capital A? What is the capital?
Capital A means that you have federal funding. So if we're going to do for sale housing, we're going to have to raise money from private sources to fill the gap. As an example, if you're going to sell a house for, say, $300,000 and it costs $450,000 to build that house, the trust is going to have to find sources to fill that $150,000 gap. And that's money that we're going to have to raise from private sources. And they're there. It requires some hard work. And there are various ways to do it. But that's the kind of resource that you have to place on these properties in order to make them, quote, affordable.
Would land donations also fit into that category?
That's one of the hopes that we have for this. You know, we've had $1 million contribution from Mr. and Mrs. Morris to specifically build affordable housing, and that land value should be part of that gap.
Because we hear, that
it's very hard for construction companies to build houses that are affordable for younger families. That construction companies can't really do it and make. So you're talking about the difference is what the construction company can build a house for and what the person can pay for it. And that's what you need to fill that spot, because, we're hearing, oh, it's really hard to build houses. It's hard for the construction company to be able to build a house that's affordable in our town. And that's what we hear all the time. So you're considering the difference between what it costs them to build it and make their profit. And yeah.
And there's
what-
gap.
And who deals with that? Would it be the housing?
What do you mean?
Who deals with where the money comes from to fill that gap?
Well, one example that's going on right now is, that you know about is what is it? The humanity.
Habitat.
Habitat's doing a project right now for sale in Great Barrington. It's in process. And Habitat is raising that gap for the houses that are going to be sold there. They have, well, they're a national organization. They're well.
Is that a project or a house?
No,
I mean, is
it's
it
a
a-
project. It's 20 units. It's a good size.
Okay, it's units, okay.
No, but it's not multifamily. It's single family houses
But it's a bunch of them.
on individual lots. And I can't quote exact numbers. Maybe you know.
Yeah,
They're gonna
No,
sell.
I'm familiar.
But the town didn't the town have something to do with the infrastructure that they were
Oh,
bringing
Great
in,
Barrington?
the water
Yes.
and
Oh,
the
sure.
electric? And so it's a kind of joint, a nice joint venture.
Right, and
And they got grants for it.
they
Right.
got grants, there's some, Patrick said, talking about the opportunities. There are federal and state grants, and you have to, shall we just say, it's not an easy business.
That's for sure.
And there are some really good national developers who do it. Lennox is doing it right now. They're doing a rental project. I just think that if you look at Pine Woods and all the problems at Pine Woods.
I'll be back in like 5 minutes.
Speaking of Pine Woods, have you been in conversation with Construct?
Well, not directly. Mike talks to contract.
What about having the Stockbridge Housing Authority take over Pine Woods? It sounds like they're doing a better job.
I think that's related to the housing production plan.
That's a question I'm asking Patrick.
We didn't want to sell this rental property. Yeah, we're not gonna get. Stockbridge Housing Authority.
One at a time, please.
All right, if you don't mind, I'd like to answer. Stockbridge Housing Authority is a state-owned facility. It's called Eden Court. Pine Woods is owned by a private entity called Construct, which is a nonprofit. Construct isn't selling Pine Woods, and I don't believe the state of Massachusetts wants to buy Pine Woods.
It's just a suggestion, something to think about.
There might be other people who might be interested in buying Pine Woods.
Yeah.
Clearly, there've been a lot of problems there and it hasn't been managed properly. And we at the trust have had ongoing issues with Construct. If anybody's been over there, it's in pretty poor condition.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or want to make any comments? This is your chance.
I think that one of the things I think that's interesting is to try to do the duplexes. I think that's definitely, in my opinion, the way to go forward.
One comment I would have is to focus on the short-term rental impact, getting that data from Granicus, so we know. We talk about the missing middle. I think it would be good to tighten up that bylaw and see if that wouldn't, try to understand if that would not help open up some of that missing middle market for housing.
Can you explain what you mean by tighten up that bylaw?
Well, currently, there's a loophole in terms of how, Michael, you spell me on this, please? They're not required, an owner of a short-term rental in Stockbridge can register as an LLC
Right. And
which
then they,
makes it difficult to track what's really happening.
right.
Do I have that right, Michael?
Well, that's why we're with the software company that then tracks based on who's applying.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it would be good to, and I realize it's controversial, because I realize there,
But the numbers do line up. I believe that the last one I looked at was 140, 42 rentals showing up on Granicus system. I believe you had 136, so it's
As-
right there.
How many?
owned outside by non-residents.
We don't.
No, I'm just saying short-term rentals available.
Okay, but we don't know how the ownership breaks down in terms of outside Stockbridge, within Stockbridge.
No, that's,
Yeah, but can we get that data from Granicus?
I don't know how they would, because they just work off of our property record cards.
Mm-hmm,
And a lot of even our single-family homes are listed as LLCs
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
and the rest. So,
How does that make a difference? I mean, you can tell by the address, can't you?
No,
The address of the LLC, whether it's local or
but
outside the state.
but the
most
state,
of our billing goes outside this, outside.
But the state registration for short-term rentals only has the street address.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you the actual
It
number.
doesn't give you the street number.
Right,
it'll
it doesn't give you a street number, so
Yeah.
you know what street they're on, but you don't know which house.
how many do we have registered in town now? Just the short-term rentals, do we know? 10?
10.
Might be, I think it's more closer to 20, but not as many. But I did find out from, if they're on Airbnb or on Vrbo, they're required by the state of Massachusetts to report. They won't let them list without being on registered with the state for the state income tax or the state room rental. So they have to be registered with the state in order to be on those two. But outside of those two,
They're allowed.
the smaller ones and other things that are out there to advertise are the
Yeah.
ones that you try to find out.
So we don't have any way of knowing, even with this contract with Granicus, which short-term rentals are,
It just tells us
How many?
who's advertising as short-term rentals. And all the information is our assessor's records.
Patrick, do you want to come on up?
Sure.
I just want to say that I completely agree with Kate that it does matter, the LLC issue. When we were drafting the short-term rental bylaw back in 2020, we weirdly, pardon me, it was like, to me, a little strange, banned certain types of corporate ownership, but not LLCs. And the reason for banning most of them, should have been all of them in my opinion, my humble opinion, was to specifically avoid a situation where we didn't know, where we might not know who owned the house. Now, where there's a conflict is that we also ban professionally managed units, which is defined by the state of Massachusetts as one owner of two or more properties from out of town. Now, all over the country, you've had these real estate investment trusts buying up property at scale to do these things, but if they're, right now they roll up each individual property into an LLC, they can get around the bylaw. One of the best ways to protect housing stock, to Kate's point, is to make sure that individuals are identifiable if they want to own a piece of property here, and if they're from out of town, they can't own two if they want to put them on short-term rentals. It's a reasonable fix that is within the spirit of the bylaw that we wrote, but is, I think, absolutely a loophole in the bylaw that we have now. And that is what I want to
Okay,
just comment on.
thank you. Yeah, and that is something that I would recommend as a focus.
I mean, the things, affordable housing trust is really supposed to be dealing with affordable, and that means whether it is for rental or ownership, it's subsidized. The question of the short-term rental bylaw, and I'd be happy to work with you guys or anybody who wants to work with it on it, but that's really between the planning board. Those types of bylaws need to be brought forth by the planning board or the select board. I mean, but I don't think those are hard fixes. I think that's a couple of sentences.
I mean, I think we should work together on it. It is not a zoning bylaw, though. The short-term rental bylaw is in the general bylaws.
Yeah.
So I think it should be a joint effort. Okay.
I think you're right, though. We should get around to it because we're at risk right now. People could, he's basically, buy them up and make them all their individual LLCs and basically, one guy can own 10 properties in town.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm aware that so there's this desire to have the young family. So I know of a young family in town. The mother is an operating room nurse, 2 small kids. I'm not sure what the husband does, but, they clearly bought a starter home on East Street. You may know who I mean. And now they're moving to Derringham. So, I mean, that's one way to think about it, is if you attract young families to some of these homes that really are, more starter homes. I mean, my home is a classic example. Nobody, sort of the typical retiree coming to this town, or, how shall I put it politely? Nobody with the deep pockets is going to buy my home, right?
Well, they might
Because
knock it down and
They'd
build
knock
it a
it
bigger
down and build a
one.
big
That's
one, yeah.
exactly what they did around the bowl.
Well, these areas where there's more traffic and, that are sort of, they're not as desirable in those areas, is my sense from driving around town. Old Stockbridge Road is a really good example. They are being bought by, for short-term rentals, whereas they might have been those starter homes.
That's right.
So,
That's where our son bought his house.
I know,
It's on Old
Yeah.
Stockbridge Road.
yeah.
Yeah, but the one good thing
They love
about,
it.
the one good thing about the home.
That's a great house, by the way.
That we're talking about is it's deed restricted. So let's say it's your first time house. So you're building your credit. Let's say that, a house like, for example, and Sally gave me permission to use this example. Sally Underwood Miller, for $350,000, she built that new house. It's like a Cape style. It's got an unfinished basement that a family could finish later. They put in septic and the well for 350 grand. All right. So a police officer in town or a teacher could probably afford a mortgage of around 275 or 3. So if the trust were to provide that $75,000 difference, they do so, but it's deed restricted. They can't flip that house for $800,000. It stays on those rolls for 15 years, at which point they would be able to flip it. So that's 15 years of someone maybe raising a family where they've got an incentive to keep it for that long. And if they sell it sooner, they're limited to like 5% after 5 years. And then another family is buying the unit because it's deed restricted. So that is one way to kind of try to give people incentive to have like young people staying in the town at not a big expense,
It's not that young people aren't looking here. I know they're looking here. They're my clients. You cannot find a house here. You cannot find a house here. And that's not just true here. It's true in so many towns, and it's true across the country. And it's not something that's just our problem. It's everybody's problem. And so this is a good thing that we're trying to make the American dream come true again.
I guess, to represent the other side of things, people are investing a lot of money in this town to live here. So I would recommend that you take a moderate and incremental approach. Stockbridge is meeting the state mandate. Most towns in Berkshire County are not. If you look at the largest employers in Berkshire County, it's Berkshire Health Systems, General Dynamics, based in Pittsfield. Yes, you do have Fairview in Great Barrington, Williams College, Williamstown. We are, those towns are at a much lower rate for subsidized housing than Stockbridge is. I think Stockbridge is doing its part, quite frankly. So I urge you to be moderate and incremental in how you approach this.
Okay,
I think Michael had his hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because it was mentioned about the EMS study that we're doing. And one of the things that we directly.
I'm sorry, Michael, about what study?
The Emergency Medical Service.
Yeah,
Committee that's
yeah.
looking at that.
Yeah.
We pulled all the demographics looking at the town, and the biggest change in the 10 years was pointing out that 20 and 30-year-olds make up the smallest percentage. I mean, I believe 20 and 30 was like 6% of the population. It was really, really low. But what's happened in the last 10 years has, quite a short-term rentals, but the number one thing seems to be retirees are moving to this town at a huge rate. And it's driven up in the last 10 years from, I think it was mid-40s to 61.1 is where we're sitting at now for the average age. So the median age, right? And so, I mean, that is a huge driver. And that's who's buying the properties
Yep,
that we see, because they're the ones that can afford
they have cash.
properties not for
Yeah.
sale right now and have the cash to do it.
Right.
So, how you change that compared to some of the other concern, that's who's buying in town and continues to buy in town, the properties. And it's really creating this hole in our volunteer services and, youth sports and youth activities and not even youth, but the 20 to 30-year-olds. It's a vanishing group right now in town.
And that
I think
just means that there will be fewer and fewer children here to have those youth basketball and to have whatever.
Well, I think it's also, I think I would argue, trying to take a fairly moderate approach to this. We're not saying we're going to add, 55, 60 units. If we are successful in the 25, that'll be fewer units than the people who have moved out in that category that Michael was just talking in the last decade. So we'd just be maybe returning a little bit to what it was a decade ago.
But Katie, I would like to point out that you may say that we look good because we meet the state requirement of 10%. The only reason we do is because years ago, someone developed Riverbrook. And even longer ago, Eden Court. But more importantly, 60% of our people are second homeowners. And we only we only meet the standard because we have such a low number of full-time residents in this town. So we have a really low base. If we had to create affordable housing for every home that we have in our town, we would have to have double what we have now. And so it's nice to say we're one of the few places in the state, and it's true that we're one of the few places, but only because we have such a few number of full-time residents.
Thank you.
But isn't a part of why we don't have young families here, we have taken a strategy, or maybe not a strategy, but we have taken all the businesses basically out of town or pushed them out of town. I mean, we used to have 2 grocery stores, a drugstore, a hardware store, 3 service stations. We had at one time in the 50s, 27 farms in town. We have now a very, very limited business base here for somebody to come to and say, okay, I can live in Stockbridge and live here and maybe find a job here. They're not going to find a job in Stockbridge. We have structured the town now to where if they live here, they're going elsewhere for work. What are they truly coming here for? The Stockbridge charm, I'll give you that. But as far as, real things that bring people to a place that they can stay and live and work, we don't have that anymore. So I'm not saying that it's not a good idea to try to get young families here. I'm just not sure that there's something here for young families other than the house itself. And
Within our town, I think that we have to look at our county. You're right, very few people, if you don't work in one of the town services professions, the fire, the police, the school, not the school, we don't even have a school anymore, but our town offices. But industry is building. I mean, there's a lot of innovation in tech. And also there's such a structural change in the way people do business. As a result of the pandemic, a lot of people love to move here and sit in their dining room, bedroom, bathroom, whatever they sit in, and tippy-tappy on their computers and work all over the world.
no, and that gives you a certain, focus of people, if that's truly what they are doing. It just, to me, we don't encourage anything that we ever used to have. We don't encourage, everything is seemingly held at bay when it comes to business, when it comes to different opportunities that, bring themselves to this town. I think we've been very, very restrictive on allowing certain things to come here. And that, I'm just saying, I think that's a big part of the issue we're talking about.
Well, I think strategically, don't you believe we really pitched ourselves as the Norman Rockwell part of the world that you can come and retire in? It's a retirement community
Well, it is now,
now.
but it didn't used to be. It was a flannel shirt
Yeah.
town.
Mhm.
And there was plenty, we had 3 Little League teams in this town. And with an A and a B team. And we had kids everywhere, and it was because a family could live and work here and not be ashamed of a gas station on the corner that might have a couple broken down cars in there once in a while. It's like we've pushed anything that would be a middle class type opportunity for somebody out. And I think that's a big part of where we're at now.
Is there a way to turn that around?
Well, I don't see that either, because we've gotten to a point where we're not going to allow that kind of thing. We're not going to allow, so I'm just saying, I think that's part of how we got here. Because we had plenty of kids that grew up here and
Well, this was
somehow,
one of them.
oh, I was one of them.
We're
Patrick was
neighbors.
one of them. So, Patrick and I played on those Little League teams together. So I'm just saying that, as I think back on what it was and where we are now, we have totally restructured how Stockbridge does business.
But
A question for you. Are you considering, I guess this might be more for Mike, are you considering town-owned properties?
there's very few, Kate. There are very, very few. In fact, we keep asking that question. Are we foreclosing on anything? Is there anything that the town owns?
Well, the town does own property, though.
Patrick usually answers.
No, Shemai, I think that, there's no parcels that I'm aware of that would be suitable right now. Certainly not any buildings to repurpose.
And a lot of our land's tied up in the watershed locations around the reservoirs and things like that that are undevelopable. So there aren't many that are available, and
Well, there
as soon
haven't
as we
been
clear a
any.
couple out of court, we'll let them know, but there's small parcels of land and many of them aren't even, the reason why people haven't paid to get them out of tax title is the fact that they're not buildable lots, so.
I have 2 more.
Shoot.
That's all right. Housing preservation initiatives. What are those, and what would you describe those as being?
Well, one example I would say is if someone needs to do, or it would be beneficial for them to do some renovations that would improve the electrical service or the electric efficiency or heating or solar, they may not have the funds right now to do that. And that would be a way where we would try to identify funding sources that would be available to them, enable them to.
Well, what is it, 40?
40B,
What is it?
40B?
The 40 that makes things more efficient, that we have qualified for in Stockbridge.
Oh, the Justice.
Oh, the
Fund.
Justice 40.
Oh, just-
Doesn't that, while it's expensive to do those upgrades, and I know what you just said, there's grants and there's other things available. But when you start to put those type of codes into building, it makes it dramatically more expensive to do those buildings. And on one side of it, you're saying, well, we want to be efficient and we want to be everything to save the earth. At the same time, you're trying to make stuff affordable. Those collide pretty head on. So there have to be some, focus on which way are we headed here? What's more important? And just an observation.
Can you come on up, please?
So the 40, Justice 40 and the 40B are 2 different things. So Pittsfield right now, the Berkshire Regional Planning right now is working on a $20 million grant for renovation of existing housing stock. There's only 4 communities who qualify based on Justice 40. Adams, Stockbridge, North Adams, in Pittsfield, and we've actually been invited to be part of that. So our part of that might be $1 million or $500,000 in money, so that if somebody makes less than 50 grand a year and owns a house as an elderly person or whatever, we can put a new roof on it. Now, we're also in a community development block grant program with Bailey Boyd that is in place now, that people can apply for similar funds to help renovate existing housing stock. None of that's coming out of the town budget. One will come out of the federal money. The other comes out of federal money that is managed by the state, the community development block grant. So this Pittsfield grant, actually, I've been to 3 or 4 of those meetings. It meets every Monday at I think it's every Monday at 5 o'clock. The BRPC runs a Zoom for those 4 towns. And then it's basically based on an EPA community change grant. So this is actually EPA money, the Environmental Protection Agency, to help people upgrade houses so they use less energy. But still, like, the minimum grant ask is 10 million and the maximum is 20, and they're putting in for 20. So, but that's nice. It's like only people from Stockbridge, because we have that designation, can apply. So that's different than the kind of the stretch code kind of issues where, you've got to build using prevailing wages, which means union, or you got to build to a different level or whatever. In this example, what she was talking about was renovating, people's houses. And there's a lot of people, half this town makes less than 45 grand a year, half the residents, because that's our median incomes. So half the people, they're retired. They're not making so much. They're not taking it out of their plans or whatever. So that's a good opportunity for a lot of us.
Thank you. Jane, can you close out your presentation so I can see who's, please? Thank you. While you're doing that, I had a couple of administrative suggestions. I know I brought this up before, but I'll try again. Acronyms for those who are not immersed in the housing plan. Could you please include a list up front, all the acronyms used throughout the report, or just write them out? I found myself sort of struggling it wasn't necessarily intuitive to go to the back of the report. So if you could just list a upfront list of the acronyms that are used throughout the report, that would be great. And then for anyone reviewing it online, would you consider making the table of contents a clickable table of contents so you can, move around in the report easily? It's just a simple thing of making it a table of contents. Then you can click on each. All you do is use the table of contents function in Word.
But what we've shared usually is a PDF, because we don't.
It translates to a PDF usually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Double check it.
If that's okay. Just the acronyms would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so anyone on Zoom? Oh, please come up and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Jackie Harris, and I live on Glendale Middle Road. And just by way of introduction, I'm a retiree here. I've lived in the community for 15 years. It's a beautiful community. I really, really love it. I'm also just a retired Deputy Executive Director of the New York City Planning Department.
Great.
So, I'm just so, pleased at being able to listen to the conversation today. I just wanted to start off by saying, I think that the Housing Trust, the Affordable Housing Trust Committee has done really an incredible job. And I think they've been very willing to listen to many of the comments that the community has raised, specifically with respect to the donation along Glendale Middle Road. So I want to thank them, and I also wanted to thank Michael because he's been very helpful in terms of answering a lot of the questions that we have. So my first planning board committee meeting, I said earlier today that it would be really helpful if you had tents with your name on it or something, because I want to make sure when I, say something.
We have them somewhere.
The right person.
We have nameplates someplace around here.
I seem to be the only one here who's either not on the committee or consultant or. It's incredible, right, to be up here. But at any rate, covered so much, you know, it's like a big plan. There's a lot of implications with respect to how this could change neighborhood character. I don't specifically know the mandate of the planning committee, but I was just listening to the earlier presentation on that special permit. It just deals with like a screen porch, whether it's enclosed, unenclosed, you know, that kind of thing, changing the footprint. The property along Glendale Middle Road that may be donated is 35 acres, a lot of wetlands. We don't have a proposal yet, you know, so I'm hopeful, you know, that in a couple of weeks, there's an engineering report that will come out that will be shared with everyone. So I'm hoping in some way that will inform the plan. The other thing that concerns me about the plan as proposed is that the town is engaged in finalizing a sewer plan. I think that's going to be really helpful in terms of guiding development should there, you know, be any proposals in the future. But I think that's coming out in a couple of weeks. There's a really aggressive timeline here to get approvals. I think Thursday there's a select board meeting. Then there's going to be another round for you to adopt. It's a lot of stuff to, you know, to review, but so I'm just going to do a little stream of consciousness kind of thing. I hope you don't, you know, you don't mind. But some of the things we talked about with respect to the plan was Stockbridge is a small town. Want to keep that character somehow. I'm concerned about 40B as it relates to development in the town, i.e. your committee structure, whether or not if that's used for future development. You know, what would your role be? I know you have very specific responsibilities with respect to special permits and that kind of thing. But this housing plan, I think, should be looked at very closely to ensure that the ability of townspeople to weigh in on these proposals that may come before you or in some way may be abbreviated as a result of our need to be more efficient as we develop affordable housing. We take that very seriously.
That's my concern. I hope I made that clear. That is my concern, that whatever might happen, you know, sort of the onus of enforcement or oversight or, you know, what are the impacts, understanding it, now falls to neighborhoods. So that's one of my concerns here.
So we, you know, have a pairing of thoughts in that regard. Thank you. I don't think the plan goes into design considerations very much. I've mentioned that. Let's see. The intention, and, you know, I think Randy and others, Liz, you know, have talked about how they envision development, at least on the donated property, to happen, but there's no guarantee that that's actually going to happen. The home ownership model that, you know, has been bandied about, anything could be developed back there unless a town takes a very strong position on donated property in particular. You know, ideally, planning committees could guide development in some way. And it seems that if there's not a lot of city-owned property, and much of the Housing Trust Fund's mission is to really try to encourage donated property, I think there's a role for planning to guide, you know, what your criteria might even be for development on donated property.
So just to that point, if you look at the wording of the, let me find it here, the actual name, so I get you guys named right, of the Declaration of Trust for the Stockbridge Affordable Housing Trust Fund, really, as I understand it, invests the authority with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee. Correct me if I'm wrong. Patrick, this is your baby.
The committee has the authority, but I don't speak for the committee, but I would certainly, I think that the planning board participate at whatever level it wants in setting exactly the kind of partnership that Jack is talking about, which is, you know, how do we approach a donated parcel?
Mhm.
You know, what if we get two more of these? Should they be parks? Should they be a combination of things? Should we do more clusters to protect as much land as we can? you know, the land
But if-
use is your bailiwick. How about, you know?
But if you have a project, you know, if you have funding for example, Glendale Mill Road, the oversight is with the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. Am I correct in that? Yeah, yeah. So,
I think there's also a caveat in the donation letter with respect to Mr. Morris's role with respect to reviewing design and development on that parcel. So I don't think it's solely with the housing committee. And Randy spoke earlier about Mr. Morris would like to develop affordable housing, but I think if you look at that letter, there's also a reference to if that isn't feasible, and we don't know if it's feasible yet or not, because there are wetlands back there. Open space might be a consideration. I had asked at a previous meeting, who's looking at that in the event that that housing is found to be not feasible? And I think the answer was there isn't anyone at this moment in time doing that, but I would encourage someone, you know, to look at it because at least some of us along Glendale Middle Road have raised issues previously about transportation. There's a lot of bicyclists now. There's a lot of pedestrians. We work with the police department to actually get some calming measures along the street, signs that talk about speed, that kind of thing. You know, if you look at the plan in totality, if we are talking about increasing density, I think that transportation has got to be looked at. I think parking has got to be looked at. I think neighborhood character has got to be looked at. I think infrastructure has got to be looked at. And some of the tools that might be available to help craft a deeper understanding of how to site housing may not be in place while you're reviewing this plan. And I know that there is a very clear timeframe in which the plan is being proposed to be adopted ultimately, I guess, by the select board in May, as I recall. So, but these are just some of the issues that I think might add a little meat to the plan. The other thing I asked earlier was, how do you incorporate changes? I mean, I was sitting here listening to some of the conversation. You have some suggestions with respect to the plan. Can the public see the revisions as they are made, or at what point, will you have another draft so that those of us who are interested, can review the plan? I think there are some concerns about at what point does a project, given the infrastructure deficiencies, at what point does a project not become affordable? For example, that's just a broader concern that I have. If there has to be a lot of funding put into making a site suitable for housing, and because of natural features, what have you, because there's a lot of wetlands in the town itself. At what point does a project not become affordable? And I understand the mission, of the housing committee, and they have a donated parcel, and I would be looking at it very seriously myself if I were in their shoes. I get that.
you would.
But at the same time, I think it's a question that my neighbors certainly,
Right.
brought up, and I raised issues with respect to if there is a hint of a subdivision or cluster housing. How do we go about really thinking about that in a neighborhood that's characterized by single-family homes? Changes neighborhood character from my viewpoint, but anyway, that's just something that I think we should think about. But even just more broadly, I've raised issues about just the applications that have come before you and how that, and you brought up Elm Court, for example, where I guess there was supposed to be some funding put into the inclusionary housing fund that is no longer available.
Well, no, they're, if they were to build the plan that we had on the books, then that would result, they would be required to put in upwards of 2.6 million into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So my concern is that, when they came before us last summer, they had a very nice plan. And now it seems that plan may have been abandoned, I'm not sure. But I would have preferred to see that other plan, which was much less impactful to the area. And I felt was a better fit for Stockbridge. So it seems to me that this requirement of 2.6 going into the Housing Trust Fund might, mean that that plan is not doable. And that would be a concern for me personally, as a resident in the town. But you've made some good points, and I see Jan's making notes, so good. So you'll be.
Jan, it's great conversations. And Patrick and,
Good, okay. So you'll be in touch in terms of things like new drafts coming out. Are we almost there, though, in terms of how much longer are you on retainer, Karen?
Until it's approved by the select board. Hopefully it won't be a long period. It's already been a long period. Yes.
Okay. So good. I'll just, one comment I will also make is in terms of increased density, if you look, I took a look at tax rates for Berkshire County towns. The lowest tax rate in Berkshire County is Hancock, and that's in 2024, that was $2.79 on the 1,000. Next is Alford at $5, Mount Washington, $5.57, Monterey at $6.13, Egremont, $6.16, Terringham, $6.26, Mount Washington, $6.32, Otis, $6.48, Terringham, $6.58, Otis, Otis is $6.62, Egremont, $7, and Stockbridge, $7.37. What all these areas have in common is low density. So I'm just putting that out there, okay? All right, any other questions or comments? Were you finished?
I think I am.
We have one more back here.
Okay, can I ask a question?
I think I got Patty here with her hand up. Patty, did you want to make some comments?
Yeah, if that's okay.
And then I'll get you, Randy.
Okay. So I would just like to circle back on a couple of the points on the ADUs and short-term rentals. And I just want to preface this by saying, I'm not like a short-term rental advocate. I'm actually completely neutral about short-term rentals. They're just a reality of life. So, but I do think that in Stockbridge, they get an undue amount of fear mongering. So I would ask you guys not to answer this in real time, but to think about as you move forward with some of these proposals for ADUs and the concerns about short-term rentals, you kind of have to ask yourself, how many is too many? Because that's really what you're saying is you fear that there will be an increase in them. So the question is, how many is too many? And when you start to analyze, I guess, the Granicus data or whatever else data that you have available, you kind of also have to look at the composition of the short-term rentals. So when I go through and I do an Airbnb search, I know some of the houses. Like I can tell you what street they're on. I can tell you who owns them. And there's some part of it is there's a fear that the short-term rentals are removing housing stock that would be used for this target demographic that is desired in Stockbridge. And I'm going to challenge you that if you actually looked at the composition of the short-term rental library, I'm going to call it, that you would find that there's a pretty significant number that are like my kind of house. I live up in Mackinac Heights, and they're like these little cottages that aren't even year round. So it's just a summer Tanglewood. They're not going to be used for starter homes because they're not year round houses. In order to use those houses for a family, you have to put like $200,000-$300,000 to like heat them and do insulation. There's like all these crazy things. My neighbors have done it, and I'm like, you're just putting bad money into a cute little summer cottage. And then how many of these short-term rentals that people are concerned about are too high end? They're big properties that groups come and have parties or whatever. there's like this idea that short-term rentals are saturating the market. And I understand the fear. I want to be really clear. Again, I'm not an advocate. They just exist, and you have to like really, you have to understand the nuances of them so that you can manage them, regulate them, and not just live in fear that they're taking over. I don't think Blackstone Group is coming to Stockbridge and buying 600 houses. So we are a cottage town. We have like a disproportionate number of these little seasonal lake places. These aren't the kinds of houses, unless you're going to buy them all and build, tear them down and build new houses for people and give them to them for some subsidized rate. So I think you have to sort of like understand the nuances of the short-term rental market. I'm afraid, this is my fear, is that ADUs will be sacrificed at the altar of the short-term rentals, because instead of understanding the short-term rentals really well and analyzing the data, we're just going to be like, oh my God, there's going to be too many. So you have to sort of start by saying, how many is too many in a town like Stockbridge? And if you could wake up tomorrow, there are boards in Stockbridge that could wake up tomorrow and say, we're going to ban them. We're going to create a law and we're going to ban them. And you would never eliminate them. People will go underground. There's already lots of ways to rent your short-term rental that has nothing to do with Airbnb or VRBO. And they'll go to Lenox and they'll go to Great Barrington, they'll go to the other towns. They're not going to go away. So I would request from this board and the select board and other people who are in authority positions to be considering this interplay between ADUs and short-term rentals, is to really like understand the nuance of the short-term rentals and don't just wave your hand and live in fear. You can control it better if you really embrace it and understand it. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, Patty. I think we're all doing the best we can to understand the nuance of all of this. I appreciate your input. Thank you very much. Let's see, Brandy.
Yes, just a very quick question. Kate, what's your plan in terms for the planning board to review the housing production plan and approve it?
I think that I'd like to give a little thought to that. And I know the select board is going to be talking about it on Thursday. So I will follow that meeting. And,
No, I think we just need some reasonable plan. I'm not trying to push it, but I think that.
But you are.
Well, no, I mean, gently, but I think that we should all work together to review the plan and.
I'll be in touch with you after the select board meeting. How's that?
Okay, that's great. We would.
I'll probably put it on the next agenda for the planning board itself to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, does that work for you?
Yeah, no, just keep chugging along.
Okay. All right, so unless there's anything more on the housing plan, I'd like to, at the last meeting, agenda and next meeting agenda items, Gary brought up realtor signs. And I've spoken with Michael about this, and this is an enforcement issue. So I think if we leave it there, we're all set.
Yeah.
Okay? Good. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor? All are adjourned.
That means
Bye, Kate. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for your hard